Hello and welcome to this lecture on Adobe Illustrator by Eduonix Technologies. In this lecture we're going to be talking about appearances, and we've gone into appearances briefly in the effects tutorials. We're going to go into it in depth in this tutorial. So go ahead and take out your appearances panel. Shift F6 is the shortcut, and you might want to draw out the same shapes I have, which is basically kind of an assortment of different appearances, but you don't need to, because you'll be able to see just from watching. If I were to click on the first shape, like I mentioned in a previous video, even the stroke and fill are considered appearances. Everything down to the weight, the color, whether it's a gradient. Now what's special about the appearances panel is that it allows you to change just specific elements and gives you a lot of control over how you can apply effects, as well as how you can edit multiple effects and manage effects. If you notice, I have just stroke selected in the appearance panel, and I have the red diamond selected on the artboards. If I were to go to rasterize, for example, so I'm rasterizing it for web. This is preset to web. My document space is set to web this time for change. Because I only had stroke selected, rasterize is only applied to stroke. If you zoom in here, of course it'll be hard to see with the square. Actually, I'm just going to go up to Effect and apply rasterize. Remember, the top selection in the effect menu is the last thing you did, and the bottom is also the last thing you did, but it gives you the options. So I've applied a rasterize to this wobbly shape, and you can see the pixels now. Now, with the appearance panel, you can drag this effects icon over to another area and apply it to that. Now, it doesn't currently have a fill, so let's give it a fill. Now, as you can see, my fill is rasterized and my stroke is not. And if I just switch this back, my stroke is rasterized and my fill is not. If I hold in Alt and I drag it over to the fill, I'll copy the effect. You can also move effects between two components. In this case, this is the path. The entire thing is considered a path. Path has a stroke and a fill. I didn't explain that, but that's how it is. This path, for example, is a stroke that's a gradient. You can hold Shift to bring up an alternate color. Click it. Shift click to change things. These work kind of like hyperlinks. You can just click them to change them. But anyway, as you can see for this, how it's just a stroke and no fill. As you can see from the red slash in the white box, that they all have different appearances. I'm going to put a really basic appearance on it. Drop shadow. So I changed it. We'll just give it a basic drop shadow there. Something to note at this magnification that drop shadows, any effects that would create blend or blur or a graduation, how to pronounce that, a gradation of tones is going to usually be a rasterized effect. So you're going to be able to see it pixelated up close. But that's only because it's pointless for Illustrator to create more blur than can be printed out if we go, or saved for our current resolution, since it is a raster effect. If you go to View, Pixel Preview, you can see that the blur squares are the size of the pixels. So Illustrator is automatically setting your raster effects to the resolution of your document or the size in pixels. So anyway, we have this drop shadow on the stroke. I can take that, move it down to the fill. I can even double it, holding in Alt or Option on a Mac. I can change one to be a little wider. Of course, these aren't going to show up because it's on the fill and there is no fill. So I can select both of them by holding in Shift and drag them back up to the stroke. I actually didn't have it selected that time. That's what I wanted to show you. How when you're adding effects of the same exact effect, you usually want to drop it down to about 20% on each of them, or just about 10% of opacity, strength, whatever it is, on the second effect. You're still getting a nice additive blur, but it's not overkill, because there's a multiplicative effect with the pixels. Anyway, as you can see, it's pretty easy to move everything around. It's very intuitive, all the panels and symbols you have down here. If I wanted to get rid of these, I could just drag it down to the trash can, just undid that, or I could click delete. If I want to get rid of all of them, I just click clear appearance. That'll reduce it to a basic vector, no stroke, no fill, no gradient, no anything. This is pretty useful if you want to reset colors, create outlines, templates, that kind of thing. Or if you just want to make all of these the same color, you can easily just go to clear appearances. Now you have no stroke, no fill. You can give them all the same thing. Give them all the same effects. If you group something, this is where it gets complicated. Since I had these applied to each one of these individually, since they weren't grouped, I would have to select them individually to be able to edit those, the opacity and the stroke and such. Because I grouped them after I set the appearances, it won't show up in the group. However, now I have a group, and I can add appearances to a group. Let's add a scribble to the entire group. If I select the individual objects, they still have the same appearances because I put them on the individual objects before I group them. If I select the group, it only has the scribble. So it's very structured in the order, in the way in which you group things and organize things. The default, to make it really simple if you're having trouble sorting through the groups you've made and the effects and what's on what is to just ungroup everything, and that's going to get rid of your group effects. But generally it's pretty easy to understand. These little buttons down here are really handy. They add a new stroke or a new fill to something, even if it already has a stroke. For example, if I add a new stroke, it's going to copy the stroke that I had selected. And let's say I make this 9 points. As you can see, there's a green stroke according to the appearance panel and a blue stroke. You can only see the green stroke because, like the layers panel, anything that's on top is in front. So if I move this down under the other stroke, as you see, with just one square, 4 lines, 4 anchor points, we can have 2 strokes, and as you can imagine, a very complex variety of different effects. You can add a pucker and bloat, which will turn shapes into lots of different things. You can do a transform. Create some really cool and unique things. So take some time to learn the different ways you can arrange things and how it basically works. And it's pretty simple to understand. Anything that's a sublayer or applied to a main part of a path, which these are the only parts to this path. It's 2 strokes and a fill. The transform and the opacity are effects, and there's effects inside the actual components of the path. So if it's inside the component, it applies to just that component. And the sky's the limit. So practice that. In the next lecture, we're going to go into styles and targeting, which enables you to save your appearances and apply them to different areas of the artwork according to the layer, according to a lot of different selections, giving you a lot of versatility. So these 2 lectures will enable you to create some pretty amazing stuff, so just make sure you stick with it and try all the variations and soak up what these tools do, what the appearance panel is capable of doing. Thanks.